Hey, thanks for tuning in to episode 1 of the Strong and Kind podcast. This episode was with Coach Mitchell Davis. He is pursuing his PhD in exercise science, and he's big into coaching theory. We talked a lot about coaching, a lot about training, developing people, and having fun. It was an awesome chat, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. So, Mitchell, let's just jump in. How is the PhD going?
You scheduled this podcast on the best day possible. So this morning I hopped on email. I'm finally approved. I'm conditionally approved to start reaching out to high schools and getting teams to participate. So the hard work's over, and now it's just we're getting in the meat and potatoes of it. So it's been a lot of sitting around and waiting, and finally I get to do the fun stuff. So yeah, it's going really well as of 9:30 this morning.
So, congrats. Tell me,
Thank
just give
you.
me the context, give the listeners of the 7 listeners of this introductory podcast a little context about, what you're pursuing.
Yeah, so I'm pursuing my PhD in health and exercise. Dave's question was pertaining to my dissertation process. I've got a few months left. Been a couple years of classwork, and then now a semester of dissertation work. I've finished my literature review, and I submitted my study to the IRB, which is an organization that makes sure that researchers aren't doing anything silly or stupid. And I was just approved to move forward with that. So that's what I'm doing.
Congrats. All right, so we will get into a little bit of like you're coaching in multiple realms right now, like CrossFit. You're also coaching at the high school level, strength and conditioning for multiple teams.
Yep.
I mean, I could go deep here and just be like, what got you into coaching? You're a former Marine too, but like what made you pursue being a coach?
Marine Corps had nothing to do with it because I was already coaching before I joined the Marine Corps. So I went into the Marine Corps late. I went in at 24, 25. I think all of us have an origin story, good or bad. I think if we stop and reflect, it's probably good and bad. So I had really good coaches and I had really terrible coaches. For me specifically, even going back to second grade, we were asked, as little second graders, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, it's cowboy, astronaut, whatever. I wanted to be a psychologist just like my dad. It's all I wanted to do. I didn't change my mind. I went off to undergraduate, got my bachelor's degree in psychology, started in on a master's program for clinical psychology. And at the same time, my old high school history teacher had just become the head football coach. We ran into each other. I graduated high school at 126 pounds, came back a bit heavier, had a little bit of muscle mass on me. And here I was with a whole bunch of free time. And he said, dude, I need a strength coach. Can't pay you a whole lot, but we get to hang out. Let's have some fun. And I said, yeah, this sounds awesome. Right. And so here I am coaching and realizing that psychology far expands sitting in a room with someone and them venting their problems to you. And I remember I went home to my dad and I said, I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. And he said, yeah, I figured. And I said, what do you mean you figured? He said, I know you, man. Like, you wouldn't have been a good fit for it. I said, why didn't you tell me this? He said, because it's not my life to live. Like, it's your life to live. You have to figure this out. And so here we are now, 15 years later of coaching. And, it's, uh, it's, it's more sports psychology than it is exercise science. And anyone who wants to argue with that, you're probably training robots. You're probably not training real humans, right?
And your ego is probably so big that you haven't really turned and looked at yourself very recently, right? Like I so you put up a lot of like good content that is pretty deep on your stories on Instagram, and I'm probably one of the few people that is like sifting through it and getting some wisdom out of it. But
Well, thank
like
you.
we get, you're the first guest on this podcast, and I think what made you come to mind is like I love coaching, and I don't know if I'm a very good coach, but I love helping people, but in a way that is not fixing, right? Like, and it's like your dad. Your dad knew this lesson very, very well. It's like it's other people's. It's not my life. My goal is to just be a counselor, right, or to provide some insight. And
Mhm.
training, like physical training, is so it can be such an amazing confidence booster for people, and both physically and mentally when done well. But it also can be something that like makes people anxious and afraid when not done well. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know, like what are your thoughts on like that type of, like dichotomy in coaching? What's that about?
If coaches would just get out of their way, we'd have a healthier America. And I find it very fascinating that with each passing year, we have more coaches, personal trainers, nutritionists, and yet we still grow more and more unhealthy. And so, although we're not going to prove causation, I'll say maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe we're just overwhelming people with our opinions, and we need to get out of our own way, right? I see all these helpful posts of if you're not training all 6 movement patterns, if you're doing whatever, you're going to wind up. Dude, who cares if you've got a 15-year-old gym bro who wants to bench press 7 days a week? Like, it's not my duty in life to make this person do what I want them to do. It's my duty in life as a coach to just get them interested in being healthier. And you know what? If you do it right, if you listen to them, eventually that 14-year-old kid who benches 7 days a week is going to realize there's more to life than a big bench, and he's going to grow. But we put up so many barriers, we make it so confusing that we take the fun out of it. I mean, my goodness, if you're not having fun while you're training, that doesn't mean there's not hard parts, or that doesn't mean that, the CrossFitter who's laying on the floor saying, why do I do this, right? But the vast majority of what we do in the weight room, in the CrossFit gym, out on the track, whatever, should be fun. And if more people like us invested in the fun of life and the fun of fitness, I believe we'd be a whole lot better off in terms of the health and wellness sphere.
Yeah. What do you think it's about? What do you think, like, is it like people's desire to be superior? I mean, because dude, I've made some of those posts, and I think some of it's like, like, what is it like when you're trying to be like a fatherly wisdom type thing, where it's like, don't bench 7 times a week because, like there's more to life than benching or whatever. But what do you think it is? Is it like the innate desire to be superior? Is it like I've gained a little bit of knowledge, let me spread that knowledge? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? Like, what is it? What do if you were going to boil it down to a few things, what is it about? Is it
Uh,
capitalism?
well, I think it's all of that, right? So whether we're religious or not, whether you're a Christian or not, I'm sure most of us have heard the scripture of raise them up in the way that they must go, right? I think that is an inherent trait in a parent or a coach, right? In the way they must go. If you're a nerd and you study things, you start to learn that we missed the mark just a little bit. It is not raise them up in the way that they must go. It is raise them up in the way that they are going. Let's look back at my dad. It was not his duty to tell me what to do. It was his duty to make my life the best that he could make it. And you know what? I might have gone off course and he might have known it, but he had enough love and faith and trust in me and in his teachings as a father that I would be able to course correct. And so I think a lot of it comes down to is we're just so anxious and we want results immediately, whether selfish, right? Like if someone's not getting immediate results, I'm going to get canned as a coach, or because we just have this inherent desire to tell people the truth when I think we just need to be a little more patient.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you at I mean, like this is like a running theme for me this week. Have you ever read The Little Black Book of Training Wisdom by Dan Cleather?
Yes. Yep.
Dude, I mean, I'm rereading it, and I think I read it like 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't really learn the lesson, which is like be patient. It really
Yep.
is the overarching lesson of that. Like be consistent in your training and then be patient. And it's just so easy, the gratification. And I think this is one, I think some of it's like people don't realize it because when you get into fitness, when I first got into CrossFit and I started to enjoy challenge, because it was like choosing it a little bit more. And when I first started running and I started to see that like I could do hard things, that was gratifying for me. And it translated into like playing soccer a little bit better and a little bit more confidence, you know. But then it's like this, then what we do is like we go through the like early stages of everything, like where we get that quick hit of relative progress, and then physiology just puts the brakes on us, right? And the hard part then is everybody's looking to optimize or find the fastest way to do things, right? And the reality of it is like really who plays the longest game for the most part, and honestly I think just who has the most fun probably wins. Like I was just thinking about Michael Jordan, and you could say like that dude's like was aggressive, right? Like hard on the people around him, right? But I
Yeah.
also think he had a shit ton of fun, like while he was playing and what he was doing. He was also very present. Like people talk about Jordan as if you're like he was just so present, right? And that's like the things that we're missing, you know like why do people even need coaches? Because me and you, like, I can be a little bit more objective with you and just be like, Mitch, hey, what do you want to do here? Like,
Yeah.
cool, let's go challenge ourselves, but let's also realize that like it might take you a little longer than that, and you can't stop just because we don't want you. I don't want you to stop just because it's gonna get like right up against you. Like that's really what coaching is to me, is just like helping, like asking good questions and then saying like it's kind of the Mike to share type mentality of like just take what's there like on any given day, right? And if you do that over and over again, things get better. When you try to like force it and when you're not having fun, that's when we struggle, right? So you're with a bunch of high school kids all the time. Like what are their mindsets around when you first, like when they're very green, what are their mindsets around this stuff? What do they think? And then yeah, how do you navigate that?
You have your bros who come in and they want to sling iron from day one, but then you also have, remember, I was 126 pounds when I graduated high school. The kids who come in, they're like 105 pounds soaking wet, never saw a barbell in their life, and it's scary as shit. And so maybe it's because I'm not in a school district where kids, like the private schools where it's almost like, the college transfer portal, right? Where you don't have these Division I athletes walking around. But to me, the second the second you make it about winning is the second you're setting these kids up for long-term failure. And so it's about a welcoming and warm environment. And regardless how their season goes, after 3 or 4 years of them being a high school athlete, I want them to continue to go and to fitness well beyond sport, right? And so with that, if fun isn't the priority, I'm not doing my job right. And so, you talk about the optimizers and like everything has to be perfect and you're following the latest evidence and are we using VBT now because it's going to make our athletes more explosive and are we doing the proper plyometrics and now let's throw some functional range conditioning in here and dude, your kids are so bored.
Yeah.
And so I would much rather lose out on some performance metrics if it means I'm just gaining more buy-in. And the shitty part is when you do this online, or whether it's a blog post or whether it's a podcast or whatever, people are so black and white. And so you hear a high school strength coach saying, "Hey, you know what? We can get rid of some performance." Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, he doesn't care about performance at all." No, you know what? If my kid is only 90% of his capability and performance, but is 100% bought in, he is going to outwork any kid who is optimized and after 4 years of varsity sport can't wait to never return to a weight room again.
Yeah.
And we have to remember they're kids.
Yeah.
They are kids. And so if I am just beating them to death with these rigid protocols and I am making them come in and they roll their eyes every day because it's more bird dogs and cat camels and I'm just hounding them about their squat depth, they never want to come back. Or if I say, hey, you know what? He's 14 years old. He's never squatted a day in his life. I'm going to give him a year.
Yeah.
He's more confident. We have to remember, guys like you and me, we go into a weight room and someone points something out to us. We're like, hey, that's part of fitness, right? Like I'm growing,
Yeah.
I'm getting better. Most humans, you go up and correct them, they already think all eyes are on them. They already
Yeah.
think that they're the worst mover in there. And
Yeah.
so as coaches, it's like, I have to go and correct this person or they will get hurt or whatever we fill in the blank there. Or the cool part is if you give your athletes time. Now, when I say time, I mean like a year.
Yeah.
It's amazing how little I actually have to do in terms of cueing and how far they're going to get in their performance. But how many coaches are bringing with them this mindset of I'm changing lives? And so they're not connecting with the athletes. And so the only thing you have to offer is performance. And so I understand why you're so driven to make sure a squat goes from your typical high schooler looking squat to Olympic level standards. Give yourself some freedom. Understand what your purpose is there. You're gonna relax a little bit. Your high school homies are gonna love you for it. And now
Yeah.
the rest of their lives, they're all for fitness. And our country needs more of it, right?
Yeah. 100%. Like, so, and I know where you're gonna go to some extent, but like, all right, because this is, some whoever listens to this, like, oh, so what matters? Does technique matter? Does programming matter? You know, and my general thinking of where you're going with this is like, yeah, at some point, but like in the early days, it's just like good, and this is one of my, good enough is what we're about, right? Like, and it's not that I'm not gonna, what you want to do, in my opinion, is just set the task up for success for that person, as opposed to creating rigid standards that like really make like, because what basically it was for me, it was like I put a barbell on my back when I was 14 years old, and I just didn't know how to squat down and hit that like rope that was pulled across the bottom. Like, what am I doing here? Right. And it was really frustrating and aggravating, especially when I saw one of my buddies who could do 135 the first week. Right. And it just became this thing where I just became more anxious in there. And
Mhm.
what would have probably just solved the problem is like, here, Dave, squat to the bench for now. Cool. Good job. Get a little bit better next week. Sweet. Right. And just build some confidence, because you're still training a range of motion that's going to make me a little stronger. It's going to help me build confidence. And just like everybody does come in with a little bit different, like, everybody's at a different level. And that's just life. But like what we do is like we create these rigid standards that like in the beginning they don't freaking matter. What matters is like let's show up, let's have fun, let's engage in meaningful activity, let's play, because play is fun. Play is meditative, right? When we would get out those like you remember the American Gladiator game? When we would play like handball to the trash can, everybody was all in when we played when for football. Right. When we went and did some drill that was like what we were supposed to do to become better athletes or whatever, everybody was like, this sucks, like, and it was really the handball that was making us better, right? But like, people don't think about stuff like that. We're like, yeah, this is what the NFL guys are telling us to do at the top level, right? So yeah, what matters in your opinion? What are the things like, And what matters, maybe, is there a criterion, down the road? I don't know if I can guess where you're gonna go, but
I mean, what matters is right in the present, and so each year kind of changes a little bit. And so, last year what mattered was we were undersized, and so let's put on some weight. This year we're a bit slower. We lost a lot of speed, so let's get faster. But what matters is getting them to buy in to what we're doing. And so let's look at so this year our line is slow off their first step. We could make them do a bunch of stuff that they don't like, or we could let them clean. Now you get into this whole debate of, oh, you shouldn't have your athletes clean because they don't know the technique. You have some coaches who say there's other ways to do it. You have other coaches who pull out the PVC pipe and just drill these kids to death. I realized after our first block, our linemen sucked at cleaning. So this block, we clean 4 days a week. They're so young. You make them do repetition. It is unbelievable how fast they get good at something.
yeah,
My linemen can clean now
yeah,
because they've done it across 4 weeks. We're up to like 16 or 20 times where they've had repetition after repetition after repetition. They like to clean, so they'll be engaged in it. And you just let them do enough of it, they're going to get better. And so to me, what matters is as a coach, as a good coach, is finding what your need is and not pulling that BS of I give my athletes what they need, not what they want. You give the athletes what they want, and that is going to get you what you need.
yeah,
We've flip-flopped it, right? And we wonder why kids get burnout. We wonder why adults don't want to fitness. We wonder why we talk to some older adults and their reflections on fitness was all punishment,
yeah,
right? Sprints were because we showed up late.
yeah.
Burpees because someone screwed up. And we wonder why people don't have a passion and a love for fitness. It's because all of our associations are negative.
Yeah. I'm trying to convey this in nuanced Instagram posting about how we have an associative mind, right? So like if you got burpees for punishment and you go to a CrossFit class, even if you're like, oh, this is just part of class, like there's a little bit of how you feel. It's like, oh, this is punishment. And like there's so much to that game, right? So let's talk about sports specificity for young kids and how you feel about it and what you maybe think needs to be done. And then after that, let's talk about variation and novelty because I know you're also engaging in CrossFit these days. So, like, what is it with sports specificity that we're getting wrong potentially, or what do you think about it? And then, yeah, well, then let's get into the other side of it.
Anytime you talk to someone who's high and mighty on like baseball needs this, football needs that, ask them what would happen if every single team just ran the same program and the only deviations we had was, preseason versus in season versus off season. Generally speaking, you're getting a lot of ers and ums. Specificity, especially at the high school level, even at the collegiate level, is probably just a farce because the strength coach has nothing else to offer. He or she is not buying into the team. You're not learning who they are. You're not getting them bought into your program. So, of course, my football coach wants to hear that, oh, this is getting your kids better at football. What's getting your kids better at football is they play football, right? And anyone who wants to argue, I think as a strength coach, we think our piece of the puzzle is bigger than it is. If anyone wants to argue that, go watch any given high school football game, especially a really good team. You're going to see a kid out there, 130 pounds, ankles about that big, just dusting kids,
Yep.
right? Good athletes are good athletes. What you're doing is you're building weight room warriors, and then that confidence in the weight room will transfer over to the field. And so let's look back at our last season. We were a 3-7 football team. Now, we had the highest opponent win percentage in the state. Like we just came up against an immovable wall. Out of the 10 teams we played, 7 of them made playoffs. Of those 7 teams, 4 of those teams played for district championships. We just came up against some studly football teams. If we looked at our strength and conditioning numbers in my, at that time, 14 years of doing this at the high school and college level, 55% of my football team repped 225 on bench. For those of you who've never been around high schoolers, that's a big number.
Yeah, that's not very normal.
These dudes could lift some weights. My 160-pounder running back cleaned 275. Like, dude, I cleaned that as an adult. He's 160 pounds. That didn't correlate to victory. But what did happen is these kids stayed in love with each other through the hardest season of their lives. They never quit. And in fact, of 10 games, we lost 2 second halves. We came out eight, not every game were we losing, but of all those games we lost, we won the second half. I don't mean that like in terms of like,
A
oh,
moral
the
victory.
second, we literally
Yeah,
won the second half.
yeah,
Now we shot ourselves in the foot in the first half, and it's hard to dig ourselves out of a hole. But think about the hardship of grinding through a squat. Think about the hardship of working on your 40 time and how that translates over to sport. If more strength coaches understood that part of it, we'd let go of being optimists and we'd start realizing the bigger picture, that 10,000-foot view. These kids going at halftime down 35 nothing, and they rally back and finish the game 28-35. And I'm telling you right now, at 15, 16 years old, that is hard to do week over week over week over week. That to me is manhood, right? Like, good on them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and like going 3-7 is not fun, but it's better than going 0-10, right?
Yep.
And I'm not saying that like the weight room was what allowed them to win 3 games, but the confidence, it's like one of those things. It's like if you take a guy who, and this is like my origin story a little bit too. You take a guy who's pretty insecure and you build him up mentally and you say, yeah, you're doing cool shit in the weight room. You're getting stronger, right? It might not transfer to your, on the field performance, but like you're showing up and you're doing good things. And, these other guys are doing it with you, right? And that's super cool. And then like who knows what next year's going to bring, but you're in a better spot than you would have been if you hadn't, like, it's kind of the duality of it, right? Like the weight room matters a ton, but it also doesn't, because if there's just some really athletic kids at another high school, it's going to be tough, right? Like that's just the nature of sports, right? But when you give kids confidence, you give them a chance. When you give people confidence, you give them a chance. You give them self-esteem, you give them a chance. And like that's what the weight room is about. And it's about like, hey, yeah, like, dude, cleaning 275 at 16 years old is wild, especially for a 160-year-old kid, right? So, whenever I watch university weight room videos, what's just what I notice? Everybody's just hyped. It's
Yeah.
not like the training protocol was probably anything special. It's not like anything other than if you lift in your garage, I lift in my garage. Like I got to get myself, and I saw that you put Motown on for your guys a couple days ago, and I was listening to Motown, so it's like we're on the right vibe. But like if 50 other dudes were like, let's freaking go, like you're gonna find that next gear, right? And that's the hard part about being an adult, is you kind of got to find that gear on your own, and I think that's part of training. But like when it comes to specificity, when it comes to these things, it's like, like any, you look at like the Russian or the Chinese system, it's like they're just putting people through the meat grinder, and whoever comes out on the other end was going to come out on the other end no matter what, right?
Yep.
What we really need to be doing is just help kids feel good about themselves, especially like right now in this crazy Instagram, TikTok like time where the kids are just bombarded with like, how scary life is, and how, like honestly, just things that don't matter are just being pushed on kids, right? And it's very anxiety inducing. And yeah, I'm with you like 100%. Like, and also just playing three sports is gonna make you a better athlete than just trying to play baseball all year round. Like it's and it'll probably keep you playing baseball longer, right? And so it's just people are getting it wrong, and I think it's just marketing, and it's kind of just fear, right? Like, oh, your kid's not playing sport, he's not playing all 4 seasons, well, he might not make the team again next summer, and it's like, okay, well, doesn't really matter. Like, let's let him have fun. So, all right, now like I do want to talk about variety because you talk about doing the clean 4 times a week, right? And I don't know what your programming is like, but like that's specificity towards a task that's also going to translate generally to something else. But like when it comes to CrossFit, and maybe we can talk about programming here a little bit, like do people get it wrong trying to do way too much, or in the name of fun, is that okay? Or how do you feel about like let's make some goals and maybe orient towards a certain thing? Like how do you think about programming? I know you coach people individually. I know you're coaching CrossFit. How do you like navigate that like fun versus you want to get good at this thing versus like jack of all trades or too much variety, you're not actually moving in the direction you want to go type of stuff?
Individual programming is easy because it's one coach and it's one client. It's easy if you build the relationship, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm talking to a coach who builds his relationship, so we don't have to go too far into that, right? And so if your coach loves you as an athlete, you're going to improve because that door is open and you're going to have those conversations and things will get better, right? When we're looking at the group programming, especially for adults, so in enters CrossFit, the two biggest mistakes that occur is number one is adults do not understand the valuable interplay between volume and intensity. And so it doesn't matter which CrossFit box you go into, the mindset is more. And so I find it hysterical. My shtick is I'm the anti-warm-up coach. When I am training a group of adults, my goal for the warm up is to get you to move in ways that aren't CrossFit. And so generally speaking, it means you're going this way,
Yep.
right? But if you look at CrossFit programming, and like you can go to Mayhem programming, Matt Frazier has this programming, Ben Smith has this programming. If you look at a lot of the warm-ups, right? CrossFit's already doing so much volume as it is,
Yep.
and a lot of their volume is under extreme intensity. What's the warm up? And so we had a workout. It was 75 air squats, 25 push-ups, 50 wall balls, 25 push-ups, 75 air squats. And this was the Metcon. So it came after a strength piece, which was 5 clean and jerks every minute for 10 minutes. And because it's a CrossFit class, you always start with some generalized warm up. Embedded in the notes, and I won't say which programming we use because I do generally like this company's programming, but
Yeah.
embedded in that was a warm up specific for the circuit. Oh, and by the way, we squatted heavy the day prior,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, so if I can get these adults to not be married to the whiteboard, too many adults when in these group fitness classes are more concerned with what the whiteboard says than what the coach is saying. And oftentimes in these group settings, it is getting the individual to realize they're just trying to do too much. Lo and behold, the individuals who didn't need to get in a bunch of wall balls and squats had a whole heck of a lot better time in their circuit. Why? Because it's just less volume.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a big piece of it. The other part is, dude, just let the adults realize how silly it is that they're so damn competitive with the scores. And so one of the things I say after most classes, right, we can use humor kind of to diffuse a situation. After most classes, my reminder to the class is, hey, listen, if you didn't get the score that you wanted, make sure you let that negatively impact the rest of your day. Not only your day, go home and be a jackass to your spouse and take it out on your kids. And that joke kind of people kind of stop and it's like you get the chuckle and people kind of realize like, yeah, why am I so pissed about missing that time frame or whatever. Another one is I explained to people that all of fitness is entirely made up. Someone
100%.
somewhere decided that this was a workout and that this is the time that you should do it in. Okay, someone else could make an entirely different workout with a different time domain, and we still call that fitness. So, it's what sort of has permeated this conversation is not taking it too seriously. But we have the benefit of knowing that, and I think the more you know fitness from the X's and O's, the physiology, the biomechanics, whatever route you want to take, you start to kind of understand like, hey, we're probably taking this too seriously. But for the general public who doesn't study this all the time and sees all the various opinions and sees grown adults arguing with each other over, a heel wedge or no heel wedge, right? They take that 60 minutes super seriously, so much so that it negatively impacts their life. And I don't care how physically fit you are, if you're missing out on life, you are not a healthy human. Cool,
Yeah.
you'll die 100 perfectly healthy and a miserable cuss, right?
Yeah. 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 That's one of the things. Have you seen the 89-year-old woman running the hurdles? Have you seen that? Her name's like Flo Myler, right? Like, and I was thinking this through. I'm like, this is dope. Absolutely dope. I hope she's having fun, right? And you know what she's not. I hope what she's. I can. We could argue about what she's doing for her training. You know what she's probably not doing? Asking BS permission from people like who would be like, yeah, you shouldn't train this way, or and she's probably just like figuring it out and having fun with it because I don't think you keep doing that, unless you're having fun. Even the days when I'm like, I have a crappy workout, like I'm still having fun and I still feel good. And that was one of the things I love CrossFit. But I think for me, I like kind of removed myself from it a little bit because it was hard not to just get into the pissing contest on a regular basis. And I probably will go back into it at some because it is an awesome fitness and like it's an awesome fitness routine and depending on who's programming and what. But it was also just like the rigidity of the whiteboard. And it's like this doesn't matter. Like this warm up is not going to help you perform any better than if we would have played spike ball, which that's kind of going around right now is people joking about playing spike ball. And honestly, spike ball incredible. Like that's probably what we should be doing is play some chill, fun games that get you moving and just reacting and playing. And then then we'll go squat. And it really is we're just at the confluence of volume and intensity and people thinking they have to hit it hard 6 days a week. And then me just as a physical therapist being like, like I'm not gonna tell you not to. You got to figure it out on your own. But like a lot of the problems that people are thinking are just there. It's just my elbow. Like my elbow's jacked up. It's like, nope, that's systemic stress, right? It's just my knee. Nope, systemic stress, right? Like, but people don't realize that and they go chasing individual things over and over again. And it's like, man, if I could just get you to have some fun, like don't put the 135, don't put 135 on, put 95 on and just crush it and like, then not worry about what that guy next to you is doing so much. Unless like every once in a while it is good, right? That's the hard part. Like it is good to compete, on a regular basis. But if you're like if it's taking up your headspace, and it really is the whose line is it anyway? Like where the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Like that was a joke I would tell in CrossFit because it's like, the only people that give a rip about Fran, how fast you do Fran, are you. And maybe if you go post it online, 7 other people will be like, yeah, good job, because most people don't even know what that is, right? So there's a lot to it. I think CrossFit has been a net positive and it will continue to, I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
like it's becoming kind of tribal. Who knows? That's what happens to these things. But um because you just kind of got back into coaching group classes, right? In the last couple of months.
Yeah, so I was away from CrossFit for 2 years. And now I've started back up. I think I'm like in my second month. But to me, coaching is coaching is coaching. I just love
Yeah.
coaching. And
Yeah.
so I've been in front of other humans for 15 years. And so whether I'm with a high school class or a bunch of adults, the message stays the same, is make it fun, just pour love into them.
Yeah.
And yeah, when those, I think the other thing with coaching is so for those of you standing in front of a whiteboard, we think that our, CrossFit hammers us into. It's like you have to have the perfect whiteboard speech, right? When you're briefing your team like on what they're going to do that day, you think, it's all the stuff that you're prepping them for the work. The bulk of your coaching comes in those interactions with the individual who pulls you aside, right? Whether
Yeah.
kid or adult. And so, what day was it? Tuesday. In 1 hour class, I had four individuals who needed something specific. Not one of them asked it at the whiteboard, right? That's the other
Yeah.
thing because people are a little intimidated. So one individual was dealing with some hip pain. We looked at some things, and of course, he's like, "Dude, this feels great, cool." Like now he's bought in. He knows I love
Yeah.
him because I went over and I helped him. I had a lady, she sprained her wrist. And so it's like, hey, nothing we're doing in this circuit is going to fly with you. Let's keep you moving now, right?
Yeah.
And then she's off doing her thing. And so I think that's also important for us to understand if you're in that group setting, is it's actually not the group setting that is making you a phenomenal coach. I don't care
Right.
how good your whiteboard speech is. It's the talking to the individual before or after class, right? Me and this guy spoke for 10 minutes about his horrendous marathon experience because I had a horrendous marathon experience, right? And now we have something to bond over. And so next time I say something controversial, something that goes against his hard set beliefs that he's picked up over the years, he's probably going to be a whole lot more likely to believe me,
Yeah.
right? And so I think sometimes, it's like, hey, wear your uniform, comb your hair, don't be drinking coffee on the floor. Like, we're turning into robots
Yeah.
versus you come in one day and your hair's all messy and it's like, oh, dude, Wyatt was up all night. Like, I'm a bit frazzled. That other parent's going to be like, been there, right? You're more human.
Yeah.
I think we're getting, especially with social media, we're just getting so robotic with everything we do. You must perform exercises this way. Don't do this or you will get hurt. And then that's just not real life at all.
What do you think is at the root of that? Why do we do that?
Humans are finite and the universe is non-finite, right? And so we have to have a reason for everything. And it is so hard to just embrace the unknown.
Yeah.
You and I talk philosophy a lot, and we look back at the Stoics. And I think anyone who really gets into Stoicism, what drives us towards them is these men were so comfortable with just accepting fate and just being able to live in the unknown. And think about it. Someone hurts their back, the very first thing they will tell you is exactly how they did it.
Yeah.
I was doing RDLs and I hurt my back. Well, okay, maybe that's just the place and time, but are we
Yeah.
sure that and then when you get them through that hurdle, they might accept that. What's usually to follow? Well, what did I do then? I
Yeah.
don't know. Why does it matter? Well, so I never do that again. Okay, well, why does that matter? Right. And so I think that's just a big part of human nature, is we have to know why. And
Yeah.
convincing people to not have to know why is an extremely, extremely difficult uphill climb.
What's really interesting is I think what we're chasing perfection because I think we think perfection. People have been chasing perfection in the form of like the perfect man or the perfect person since the dawn of history, right? And it's I think if we think we can do something perfectly, it will we will avoid the pain associated with the messiness of life, right? But like life is inherently messy. Look at your hair right now. It's beautiful, right? But like the messiness is actually like the good stuff, right? Like, and this is one of the things that's really powerful about like a mindfulness practice or just even like reading stoicism and buying in. I want to talk about buying in before we end because I think that gets thrown around in a negative connotation. um but like the messiness is where like the good stuff comes from, right? Like it's, when you're starting a business and it's like, oh, this is crazy. And you're like figuring it out. Like if it was perfect, you wouldn't be learning anything, right? And it's the same thing with training. Like if I could somehow come in and get you to just and you almost see it with like I always go to like people who are really good at the weight room right away, they almost don't care anymore. Like, you know, like they come in, they're super strong, and like it's kind of it's almost like, that wasn't very challenging or whatever. And it's like they kind of just like, all right, I can, and you know, they might re-engage with it later on down the road for different reasons. But like I remember a guy who squatted like 450 in high school, like really well. And it's like he's not lifting anymore, right? And it was like, damn, like I'm almost glad that that wasn't me. Even though at the time I was like, God, I would have killed to be that for that to be me, right? So, but I think it is, if we can eliminate any uncertainty, we can avoid pain. When like pain is a teacher, it unfortunately is a teacher, right? And we don't have to get too much into the Dr. Phil pain, you know, pain is a teacher here, but like you know, it is. And I think that's one of the things that like from a medical standpoint, it gets hard to navigate because we can't just say that to people because they want relief, right? But it's also just when you accept the uncertainty and we just move you forward, good things happen, right? Like, and yeah, there's just so much to like, I'm just so afraid of optimization in everything because I just think it sucks the life out of people. Like people are going into these jobs that are optimized and they're just like bored out of their mind and they don't have any meaning in their work, right? Or like, you know, there's just so many, it's just very pervasive. And it seems like this, you know, like uh thing that we're chasing that is not actually going to take us where we want to go. It's just going to make us more miserable, right? Which is the thing, like you said earlier, like life is for living, right? Not trying to like not try living to 100 in a bubble is not really living to 100, right?
Right. So I'd be curious the long-term effects of these optimizers, right? And so the morning routiners, which I often make fun of, you know, especially those who are taking the ice bath, right? Um, if you optimize your entire life, what happens when shit hits the fan? And so I look at it in terms of my pops is 72, right? He ain't gonna live forever. If I'm so obsessed with optimizing my life, what happens if my dad has to go into hospice or my parents have to move in with us and now I have to take care of a toddler and a 70 something year old? What happens if all of a sudden Warwick decides that they're just going to make a gym teacher their strength coach and I'm not in there anymore? And now all of a sudden we're out buku bucks financially, right? And I have to totally change up my life. If you spend every waking moment trying to optimize what happens when life, without a doubt, it is not an if, it is a when life kicks you in the nads and you have to work through it. And so part of me, it's like, yeah, I love making fun of them, but part of me, there's also if I have a client who is super obsessed with optimization, I get worried
Yeah.
because what is this going to do? Anyone who is an optimizer does not have a child under the age of 4, and if they do, they don't care about that child. Period. You care about yourself more than you care about your offspring because you cannot optimize your life if you are a present father or a present mother. End of story. And so, yeah, this obsession with optimization, it's funny, but I think more of us need to stop and realize the negative repercussions of perfecting your life and what that's going to mean to you and to those that you love somewhere down the road.
Yeah. I mean, you've read some Nassim Taleb, right? Like Anti-Fragile. I mean, it really is like complex systems actually thrive basically out of you know, trying to disrupt the system, right? And the system corrects, right? And like we are really that, but we also like human. I always just go back to this. It's like you got this incredibly fast like hardware in the form of your like you know, your non-cortical brain that is your emotional thing that gets you to move and gets you to really live. And then we have the gift and a curse of our neocortex on top of it that literally like is the reason that life can be really awesome for humans, but it's also the reason for most people suffering because they never learn to manage it, right? And like, an optimization is basically like trying to figure out how to avoid, like, not. I mean, I think there's probably some semantics in there. Like, what are we trying to do? Like, I wake up and when I wake up and when I don't touch my phone first thing in the morning, or when I meditate and then I read, it's better. But I'm not doing like a 50-minute freaking routine, right? I'm just meditating and I'm reading instead of scrolling for 45 minutes on Instagram or and I'm making breakfast and I'm moving forward, right? Like that does kind of provide a positive benefit to my mood during the day. Great, right? But for me to think I need to do something like this robust thing to that's fragile to me. Like you can literally choose to just reset, right? At any given time. And yeah, like you said, then life's gonna kick you in the nads and you gotta just learn to play better, right?
I
So
think the difference is is this thing bringing me enjoyment in life? So you don't touch your phone, the rest of your day is better. That's great. But what happens on the day where you do touch your phone? Does it make your day worse? And I don't think this has to be an either or, right? And so the individual who must ice bath every day, it
yeah.
becomes ingrained in them day after day after day. If you want to know if you're a bit addicted to something, right? Take it away for a day, and are
Hmm.
you miserable?
Yeah.
Ah, dude, the kids were up late last night getting sick, so I slept in. I missed my ice bath. I'm exhausted at work. I can hardly keep my eyes open. Okay, cool. Hey, you know what? You probably need to take a step away from ice bathing for a little
Yeah.
bit because now this is inherently bad for you. And so I think that's something if humans could ask themselves with whatever their daily routine is do I need this or do I like it? If you like it, grip and rip, baby. If you need it, you're missing a huge something somewhere else in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like a very good, like, basically rule for anything. Anything that, like, I need my coffee straight in the morning. Like, well, like, go without it once and just prove to yourself that you don't, right? Like, there's a lot of power in that. All right, I want to touch on buy-in because in the physical therapy, in the functional medicine world, a lot of that's like, hey, I gotta like give them a quick hit so that they like trust the process, right? And what you're talking more about is more of like a overarching, like, communal love for people that gets them to buy in, that they can achieve, right? But when you talk about buy-in, like, what are the things that you get people, in your opinion, like, on board with what you do, and why, and like how, do you go about thinking about stuff like that? Like, what are the things that you're like, yeah, this kid is going to benefit from this because it's going to help him as a man, right? Grow into a man, right?
Rule number one, and this is like you can't go a day without doing this, is you I leave nothing up to chance. That kid will not think that I love him. That kid will know that I love him. And how does that kid know I love him? I freaking say it.
Yeah.
Say it. Especially as a man. Say it. Say to that kid, I love you. Secondly, on top of that, is you let that kid know that you love them for who they are. So we had a kid, kind of a chronic, he would get in trouble in school, never on the team, but gets in trouble in school. Pulled him aside one day. This is after like a second or third offense. And I said, hey man, why do I love you? He said, because I'm a football player. I said, absolutely not. I don't give a shit that you play football. I love you for who you are. That kid's attitude with me went from pretty good to stellar,
Yeah.
right? We had a kid who you would think on the outside looking in has a perfect life. After our season, I got the biggest hug, tears streaming down his face. Now, of course, because he's crying, I'm crying, right? Full on phenomenal hug, right? And just him saying how much he loved me because of the impact I had on his life. Our boys basketball team just won the section title last night, right? Awesome game. Every single dude that dabbed me up got a hug back, and every single dude was told, I love you and I'm proud of you. And you know what? They all said it back because they
Yeah.
mean it, right?
Yeah.
And it's said back without hesitation,
Yeah.
right? And so you know that the buy-in is there because chances are, for the first time in their lives, outside of parents, someone has told them that they love them for who they are. no
Yeah.
sports attached,
Yeah.
right? And so you couple that with you're now just being on an authentic human,
Yeah.
right? I think there's a sense of freedom when you love someone and you let them know it. You no longer have to be perfect coach.
Yeah.
There's days
Yeah.
when you're going to come in frazzled. There's days where you're going to come in exhausted. There's days where you're just a little bit off. And now you're sharing that with them. Dude, I am spent, right? Our basketball, like I go to bed at 8 p.m. I got home at 10 p.m. last night. I guarantee you, because I was up at the same time I always am, I'm going to be tired by the time I go and train football.
Yeah.
If I'm a little off, if I'm not as engaging, my dudes are going to understand. Yeah, Coach Davis is tired because he went and supported other kids in this school because he loves them.
Yeah.
And think about how much of the coaching stressors would just disappear if we just surrounded those under our care with love.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, you're a remote based coach as well, how many times a client will reach out with a struggle. And yes, our job is to help. So we give our opinions. But I have changed from just being the analytical, like, hey, here's what we do. I then tacked on top of that for years, but hey, it depends. I'm
Yeah.
now realizing the piece that I missed was, and hey, I hear you and I feel for you, but I need you to know how proud I am of you for continuing to work on this.
Yeah.
And we'll get there, right? Humans want to hear that they're loved, period. So the old school coaches listening to this thinking that that's way too soft and men shouldn't tell other men they love them, like, okay, you can turn the podcast off now. But for the rest of you, go
Yeah.
about your day, start telling people you love them and see how much it impacts your life and how much it impacts their life.
My hesitation with that is because I do love people. I just think I know like it is like a little bit out there. I mean, and it's dude, I'm also like I'm not working with high school kids, and like I agree. Like maybe it's just in my brain. It's a little easier to be like, dude, Davis, love you, dude. Like I appreciate you. Like that does come easy, but like adults telling other adults that like aren't my wife or my mom or my dad, or my in-laws, like I love you, or my brothers, right? It's a little bit, it gives me some trepidation, but at the end of the day, like who gives a shit, right? Like if you're like, hey, I love you for showing up and being yourself, I love you for trying, like like non-conditional, but I like just loving. It really is at the core of it, like that is the human, that is what sets us apart, and we should lean into that more, right? But we don't because we're dickheads. Like
Well, I think we're so hesitant. It makes us feel weird, right? And like I need people to know when I decided I'm going to tell my athletes and my clients and my friends I love them, it was hard to do. But I
yeah,
said, "Hey, I'm going to do it." And why is it so hard? Is because humans want to be loved.
yeah,
And so how fearful is it if I extend myself, if I am vulnerable and
yeah,
I say to a client, "I love you and I'm proud of you," and they don't acknowledge it?
yeah,
Hey, thanks. That hurts,
yeah,
right? Like, dude, I told you I love you, man. Like I mean it, and you don't love me back. And I will emphasize that for men, it's a whole lot harder, right? I believe for women, it's easier for a woman to say to another woman, I love you, and then for her to return it, right?
yeah,
It is a wild and have fun with this. Tell your buddies you love them and watch the stumble.
yeah,
Love you too, man.
yeah,
Right? Almost like, and some of them just won't even say anything. And
yeah,
so I believe that's the hardest part is like, dude, I just shared my heart with you, bro, and you're not extending it back. That hurts as a human because we were
yeah,
put on this earth to be a part of a community, and that community should be filled with love.
yeah. No, I think that's very profound, and I'm gonna work on it. And I appreciate the sentiment. And I think it really is the foundation. It is the foundation. Like you, when you go into when you're helping someone, you start with like, all right, let's do this together, and I'm going to extend love. I think like did you ever read "Waking Up" by David Hawkins?
No.
It's like a pretty deep, it's about like not waking up. Is it waking up? No, letting go by David Hawkins, not waking up. letting go. And it's like it's about learning to like just let go of stuff. But he was a clinical psychologist. I think he got his, he's a PhD, MD too. But he's like, what I would do before sessions with people is I would just reset my frame every time and just like I would in my mind love them, right? And it's like, and it was game changer for clinical practice because it was at the foundation that I at least if I was doing that, I was doing the best I could to and then navigating things. So really appreciate this, man.
Oh yeah,
Coach Mitch Davis. What's your handle on Instagram?
Coach
M
M_Davis.
Davis. Yeah, on Instagram. Warbird University. Is that or is the Warbird Book Club's going down? I'll hook up some links in this YouTube to get people to you. But I
Yeah,
appreciate the time, man.
yeah, I appreciate it. I always love chatting with you, Dave. You're a brilliant dude. You're a great coach. Above all, I love you, man.
Hey, I love you too, dude.
Awesome. See ya.
Peace.